Welcome back to Memos to the President. I'm Ylli with a special competitive studies project. It's truly an honor to have Dr. Dario Gil, the Undersecretary for Science at the Department of Energy, as my guest today. Sir, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Good to have you, Dr. Gil. Let's start with something that I really like about your story. Like mine, you're an immigrant.
I am.
And you're pretty bullish about your background, your story, how you got here. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Well, so I grew up in Spain, in Madrid, and I'm the youngest of four brothers. And my parents were always very passionate that we had as much international exposure as we could. So starting when we were 10 years old, although I'm younger than my other ones, we all spent summers in Ireland, and that's how we all learned English first. And then we got to choose a second country where we could go, and went to France to learn French and so on. But my oldest brother started the tradition in our family of coming to the United States as an exchange student during the senior year of high school.
Oh, senior year of high school, yeah.
So I came in here when I was 17 and as an exchange student, and I ended up in Los Altos High School in California.
Okay.
And I just loved it.
That's far from Spain.
Yeah, far from Spain. And I love America. I love the whole experience, and that became my journey. And lived here ever since, and became an American citizen. And I have my wife from Maine and my two daughters now that are in college. And so yeah, it's been an extraordinary experience, and I'm just so grateful for all the opportunities I've had. But yeah, the immigrant experience is a big part of my identity.
I agree, and I don't think there's a country like this in the world in which my story and your story really can happen. You are the Undersecretary of Science at Department of Energy.
Yes.
So first of all, I don't think many people know that Department of Energy has a big role in the science and what science does in our country. And you're obviously one of the key actors in that space. Can you unpack a little bit about what does the Undersecretary for Science do in the Department of Energy?
Yeah, so first, let me just confirm your assertion that people don't know what the Department of Energy does.
Yeah.
And, it's been an interesting, discovery, right? Because I've had a long relationship with the department through the National Laboratories and the collaboration. But the average person is not aware that the Department of Energy does three big things, right? There's the part that, as the name indicates, relates to energy matters, right? With policy and support for a variety of energy endeavors and so on. But actually, the biggest parts of the department are, first, there is something called NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration. And that focuses on developing, building, and maintaining the nuclear stockpile of the United States. So it's a hugely important mission for our national security. Then the Secretary for Science, my role, it is the largest federal sponsor of physical sciences research in the United States. But the thing I would like to highlight that sometimes people don't know is we run and operate the 17 national laboratories of the United States.
Incredible institutions, yeah.
And they're incredible institutions that touch almost every aspect of science and technology. So in my role, I get to work with all the 17 national laboratories and push the boundaries of science and technology forward at a massive scale.
Right. This is your first full-time job in government. So I want to ask you because, everybody was excited when you were nominated. But then it took a couple of months, actually, until you got confirmed. So describe to me the first month in this new full-time government job.
Yeah, well, I wish it had been a couple of months to get confirmed. So yeah, look, my career, I had spent 22 years at IBM, where I left as the Senior Vice President and the Director of IBM Research. Began the process with the nomination of the President in January. I had my confirmation hearing in the Senate in April. And then it took a little while until all of that got resolved. So I only got a chance to start until very late September, right? So a few months into it, and and the week I started, there was a government shutdown, right? Like around that. But the good news is we could keep working, fortunately around that, and that first month and a half. Not only is about learning how to be effective, right, in the new context, which is different, but we were really focused on launching a massive initiative, which I know we will talk a little bit later on, the Genesis mission.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I would say that first month and a half, it was learning how to be effective in the new context,
Right.
new colleagues, new team. I was working a lot with all the 17 national lab directors. We would meet every week to discuss like strategy and directions where we're going to go. And then launching a massive national effort, which was accomplished in the first 6 weeks.
Right.
And since then, I've been focusing on execution.
Right. Well, I think obviously you and Secretary Wright came with a vision. And I think the first months, what you have done is you have realigned the offices. Can you tell us more about how does that realignment, translate your vision?
Yeah. So within the context of the Undersecretary for Science, what we have done is the Office of Science is sort of like the big engine,
Yes.
right? That's an $8.4 billion a year funding agency of physical sciences research work, right? And again, that encompasses everything from high energy physics, and biology and nuclear physics and high performance computing and isotopes, so a huge range of issues. But within the priorities that the Secretary and the President have laid out, first, obviously, within the Department of Energy is like the energy focus around that, on like how we're going to shore up our electric grid, massive new investments in nuclear, right? Investments in other strategic areas. And then what we've done in the Undersecretary for Science is to say the priorities are fusion energy science. So we have created a new office focused on a very distinct goal than the underlying support of fusion science, which is we want fusion power plants.
Right.
We want to make that happen. That's the dream of the field.
Yeah.
So that fusion energy office is focused on how do we achieve that by early 2030s,
Right.
like the first prototypes around that. People debate when that window can happen, but that's his goal. So we focus on how do we create integrated roadmaps for the country that unite federal investment and private sector investment and universities, and then the clarity of the goal of the outcome we want. Similarly, we created the AI and quantum office. And this is because those are the central computing technologies of our time. And again, it is not only about supporting the underlying science, which we will continue to do in the Office of Science, but the clarity that we need AI supercomputing capacity that we got to stand up in the context of Genesis, within quantum that we got to realize a fault-tolerant quantum computer for science. So it is the companion of the underlying science investments that when they become very focused and outcome-oriented towards a specific technological goal, we've created those offices for that purpose.
Right. Before we get into specific projects that you're working on, I would just wanted to double down on the work of the labs. You mentioned 17 labs. I'm sure a lot of people don't know, where they are, what they do. You mentioned some of the key items they work on, but can you just elaborate about the relationship you have with labs? Obviously, they work for DOE. And what do they do? What are some specific areas that focus on? I know historically, we all know Los Alamos' role in this and others, but there are 17 of them. So just a quick introduction to what do the labs do and how do they link to the main DOE?
So the labs are a national treasure.
No, I agree there.
Number one.
Yeah.
And we have over 40,000 scientists and technical staff as part of the lab. And the overall total population in the lab is even larger than that in all the support functions around that. But just to give you a sense of the scale.
40,000.
Scientists and engineers and technical staff around that. And of course, the origin of the labs is during World War II, right? The Manhattan Project, right? And everybody knows some of the famous examples of that, like you mentioned Los Alamos and Oak Ridge and others, right? So that was the origin. And there was a very important strategic decision at the end of the Second World War, which is we have mobilized all these amazing scientists and engineers in the context of winning the war. What should we do in times of peace? And following the war is the decision sort of comprehensively was we want to continuously mobilize the capability of these laboratories that we have been creating for the purpose of national security, but also for the advancement of science that can deliver economic and health benefits to the American people. So over time, decade after decade, that complex was built. In the 1970s, the Department of Energy was created coinciding with the oil crisis. And it allowed an organization of the structure of the National Laboratory Complex, right, to be in its full form. So they have evolved over time and expanded over time. Now, in the laboratories, for example, through the Office of Science, we have supported, I think, 122 Nobel Prize winners. 22 elements of the periodic table were discovered in the labs.
Yeah.
The Human Genome Projects are there. If you hear, for example, on AI for Science initiatives, like we heard, from Google DeepMind on the protein folding.
Right.
The origin of the protein data bank was the National Laboratories, right? The nuclear energy was created and incubated by the National Laboratories. If you look at AI right now, that dominates so much of our conversation, the very first place where network of GPUs at a reasonable scale were connected together to actually do useful work was 20 plus years ago in the laboratories. So we built some of the best supercomputers in the world. So there's just almost no aspect of our lives hasn't been touched by the work that the laboratories pursue.
And the fusion ignition at the Lawrence Livermore.
Look at fusion, right?
Exactly.
The first demonstration of gain in fusion with the National Ignition Facility in Lawrence Livermore. Right. So again, and we could go on and on and on and on, but it is one of the things I could convey to the bottom of my heart. I wish one of the privileges I have is visiting the labs.
Right.
Meeting
That's
with
what
the
I wanted to
scientists.
ask you. How many you have visited so far? I know you're going next week, I think, to a couple of them.
Yes, next week I will be visiting, both Los Alamos and Sandia as well, and I'm going tomorrow to Brookhaven and so on. So I think by next week I'll be around 12, right? Around that, so I've made a lot of progress. But the thing I wish I could transmit to listeners and to the American public is they should feel so proud of their laboratories. Sometimes I give this comparison when Ken Burns said, the national parks were America's best idea. Well, I would put a close second to the National Laboratories.
Exactly.
And they do so much, such passionate and talented group of people focusing on missions that really matter to us.
Right. What struck me the most when I visited the labs when I was in DoD is first the quality of people and dedication those individuals had really for those missions. And these are individuals that can go anywhere in private sector. But yet they have dedicated their careers and lives really for the missions of the labs.
Yeah, that's right. And you're absolutely correct. It's a very mission-driven place.
Exactly.
And the missions are, the missions of science and energy and national security. So they're people full of purpose, right? Yeah. They do big science. That's another characteristic of it. They are building and they have some of the most incredible scientific infrastructure, some of the most, not some of the most, the most complex scientific instruments humans have ever created, right? Of all forms of particle accelerators and light sources and telescopes and fusion and and supercomputers. So they're phenomenal in terms of the scale of ambition. People pursue projects that sometimes take 10, 15 years to build, not because they're slow, but because how sophisticated and complex the endeavor and how ambitious it is. So I think that's phenomenal. But another thing that you mentioned about they could be in the private sector and doing all sorts of things. I think one of the things I have a lot of admiration for is that when the National Laboratories were created, there was creativity in the contracting mechanism of how to operate it. And I think the fact that we operated as this, they're operated by other entities that, we award contracts to operate on behalf of the department, has allowed greater flexibility in hiring, in pay, in career progression that we could have done with the federal, with federal employment directly. So they were very visionary in how they set it up, and it has served the country well.
Yeah. Let's talk about the project you mentioned, Genesis project. Obviously, a huge undertaking, historical, one would argue. Tell us a little bit more about the background, why now, and then some of the objectives you're trying to achieve with the mission.
Yeah, the Genesis mission has a very straightforward thesis, which is we're in the midst of a revolution in computing, which is going to transform how science and engineering are practiced in America. The revolution in computing that we are discussing is composed of three elements. One is built on the decades of progress of semiconductors and high-performance computing. The second is AI, and the third is quantum computing. And the platform that we're building as part of the Genesis mission will bring together all three and will create on top of it an agentic framework, an AI agentic framework that will be able to tap on each of those computing modalities and pair that framework with our scientists and engineers to help them with the whole discovery process, from hypothesis generation to experimentation and analysis. And crucially, pair it in closed feedback systems with our scientific instruments and manufacturing environments. All of that I just mentioned is what we refer to as the platform. Genesis does a second thing in parallel, which is we have constructed a portfolio of lighthouse challenges, think about them as grand challenges, in energy, in science, and in national security that will both inform and leverage the platform to transform how we solve those problems. The ultimate policy objective we have with Genesis is to double the productivity and impact of America's R&D engine, which is $1 trillion a year engine, that it is the underpinning of our economic growth and vitality and so on. So that's the thesis. Transform science and engineering with the revolution in computing, mediated by AI and quantum, et cetera, and demonstrated by building an enduring platform that sits and overlays on top of our national laboratories and then diffuse it across America's R&D ecosystem.
Right. In practice, I think, to translate, you're bringing hyperscalers, which have the best AI models, with high-performance computers that labs have, you have El Capitan, among others, and data sets, to go after the most, interesting scientific discoveries.
Yeah, so I think let's unpack that a little bit. You're correct that the Genesis mission involves deep partnership with industry and with academia. And the reason for that is because of the $1 trillion we spend in R&D a year, $700 billion is spent by the private sector. And in these areas like AI and quantum, the private sector is a dominant investor and talent holder, of all of those things. So you're right. From an AI perspective, what we're trying to do is, today AI does a wonderful job in language and coding. We want to bring AI into the realm of physics and mathematics and engineering and so on. So yes, private sector actors have phenomenal state-of-the-art models, but they need to accompany the scientific data sets, the experimental facilities that we have, the high-performance computing simulation codes that can ground and generate experiments to create surrogate models in AI, the expertise. All of that is going to be required to get AI to do science and engineer at a world-class level. That the private sector does not possess on its own. So the partnership, we need each other to accomplish that goal, and that is a core thesis also of Genesis.
We're at the beginning of 2026. What are the milestones you're looking to achieve this year with Genesis model mission?
Yeah, so they involve, I go back to platform and lighthouse challenges. So on the platform, we're already building it, So we have major milestones of we're standing up, back to the private sector partnership, just to give a couple of examples. The Secretary announced in October partnerships with NVIDIA, Oracle, AMD, and so on. So we're standing up 2 10,000 GPU clusters at Argonne and Oak Ridge. They're going to be operational in Q2 of this year. So that's important. So that's example. There are many other participants that are bringing capacity on the cloud, different forms of specialized hardware. So I don't want to single just the two of them out, but there are many of those that we're standing up. Like more AI flops are needed across the complex. Great. Second, we're standing up through an agile methodology, the agentic framework that allows us to do the orchestration of going from hypotheses to launching simulations, to launching experiments automatically, to creating the data environments with which we can share across the network, to the data sets. So we will see a lot of progress and evidence on each of those components of the capability. So those are, and we're going to be delivering that on a month-by-month basis kind of thing. And then second, very soon, meaning in the next month or so, we will be publishing, putting out the portfolio of challenges so that we can now begin the process of team formation, spanning national labs, private sector, academia, and we are going to build an incredible collection of the best teams in the country to pursue this portfolio of grand challenges. And we're going to do all that in parallel, and I think everybody will get to see what's the portfolio, what's the teams that are performing around that, and what I want for everybody to be proud of is, hey, even if we're not participating directly on the Genesis mission, we can root for its success, and we know what they're tackling, and what teams are performing it, and how do we make them successful.
Fast forward 3 years from now, when you're looking back into what you have achieved, what would you like, to say we did this with the Genesis mission?
I think two things. I think that we leave an enduring platform that overlays the national laboratories and the broader ecosystem of America for how we do discovery. And those may sound like abstract, but I think now the public and people can have a better understanding what platforms are.
Right.
And I would give the example sometimes by analogy of the internet days. If we start in the 1970s and we say, hey, we have this little project of connecting some computers with some protocols of exchanging, IP between them, you say, I don't know, that sounds like very narrow. Later, you say, that was the internet.
Right.
And everybody understands the internet is a platform and how powerful it is to touch every aspect. We want to leave behind an enduring platform.
Right.
And it's a digital platform that takes advantage of all of these elements in computing to touch every scientist and engineer and every mission that the National Laboratories do.
Right.
That would be an amazing legacy to leave behind around that. And the second thing is that through the proof that by solving a wide variety of scientific and engineering challenges with the new methodology, not only could we list 30, 50 examples a la AlphaFold, 4 years from now, but also that as a consequence of that success, every discipline in America that practice science and engineering, it's ingrained that this is the new methodology with which to conduct state-of-the-art science. So if all of those elements, an enduring platform, plenty full of examples of things we all care about, and a methodological change that touches every aspect of R&D and science and engineering. That would be a before and an after in our wonderful journey in science in America.
Yeah. I think the criticality of DOE right now is that energy has really come at the forefront of everything related to AI.
That's right.
And I think right now we don't have the issue of semiconductors or AI models. We have the issue of how to satisfy the energy needs going forward. So I wanted to ask you about your vision there. You've talked about 3 horizons before. So how do you fix the immediate needs that we have?
That's right.
In transmission and the grid and everything else. You talk about the second horizon with the renaissance of the nuclear energy. And then we touched a little bit about fusion, but we can talk more about the fusion. So can you elaborate how you're attacking all these 3 challenges when obviously the headlines every day are energy, we need energy more because of the AI?
Yeah. So you're right. Those are different horizons, and energy is the rate limiting step, of AI right now, and especially at the scale of the ambitions that we want to pursue as a country. So the department, what is very exciting is we get to work on both sides of the equation, right? And Secretary Wright is an incredible leader and champion of this vision that starts with the right policy goals that have been set by the Secretary and the President, which are just a very simple statement. We need more energy, not less. That sounds so obvious and disagreement, but we have been in times not so long ago where people are like, I don't know that we need more energy. Energy is problematic and so on. We need more energy. Energy is life. Energy is prosperity. So we start with that. And that then means that we want policies of energy addition, not subtraction.
Right.
So everything from the regulatory environment to how do we maintain assets and maintain the grid stability of reliable, affordable, and secure power? How do we continue to invest? So there's policies, investments that have to happen in the near term to ensure, particularly on the grid element of it, how do we enable that to continue to shore up and grow? Then you're right, we're making incredible investments, and there's a renaissance of nuclear in America. Again, an example that not so long ago, that was an industry
not a cool topic,
that was not a cool topic and not something we wanted to do. So that has changed, and it's a huge priority for the administration. And again, it's everything for permitting to the use of loan assistance to be able to provide a backstop to enable these projects to flourish and unleash private sector capital to projects that are underway on large-scale nuclear and SMRs, you name it. So huge amount of momentum. I think everybody can feel how different it is right now on nuclear. And then the third horizon is one of the grandest, sort of aspirations that we've had in energy. How can we build fusion energy and make it a reality?
Yeah.
And
I like the way you talk. You say it's like the pinnacle of, technological advancement. We can use the sun's energy for our life.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at it like building like the energy that powers stars here
Right.
on Earth, building a little star
Right.
on Earth,
Right.
I mean, it's both inspirational
It is,
and
right.
just so
Yeah.
complex. It's one of those things that you can just say it as a sentence. It's like, please build me a star on Earth. There's a
Right,
very
like,
different
good
one
luck,
to
yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
So, but we are in the business of doing it,
Right.
right? And it's us in the National Laboratories, and it's us in the, and in the private sector,
Right.
who are making this a reality.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
there's probably in the United States alone, $9 billion of venture capital that has been invested in fusion. But a lot of that is built on what the Department of Energy and the National Laboratories had enabled, and we're an indispensable partner to make that vision a reality.
Right. No, it's incredible. Like, in your estimates, what are the energy needs that we have to reach in the next couple of years to continue the AI, like I would call it dominance, for the lack of a better word, maybe now?
Yeah, this is an area where, and I know before we got in the podcast, we were chatting a little bit, there's
Right.
a lot of error bars, but
Right.
depending on the estimate, certainly it seems like even by the end of the decade, like we may need at least another 100 gigawatts
Incredible, yeah.
or so. But again,
Right.
there's a lot of uncertainty, and we need to triangulate what is the appetite to allocate capital, which is massive. Technological supply and need, energy capacity of growing sort of production and the grid that rapidly. But there is an appetite. I mean, now you're talking about, computational environments where, I mean, I'm amazed that we were talking about a gigawatt not so long ago.
Right.
I was like, I can't believe we're going to build a gigawatt computer.
Right.
But now people are talking about 10
10
gigawatts
gigawatts, yeah,
computers
yeah.
and so on. So it's the scale of it. It's
Right.
just
It's
so
incredible,
astounding.
yeah.
So yeah, we have our work cut out.
Right. I want to ask you about China. You've been pretty vocal about how you view the tech competition with China. Obviously, all these technological advancements you're working on, China has been doubling down, for many, many years. In some areas, really getting ahead of us. In some areas, building the necessary infrastructure. How do you view the competition?
It's the pace-setting competition, right? I mean, is our most formidable, right, rival and adversary around this. China is a very science and engineering-centric, country. I mean, and it goes from the leadership and how they are allocating investment on this. They view the possibilities of technological offset in their competition and strategic rivalry with the United States as a competitive advantage. So if you look at it from a sort of like threat perspective, it is I think is the place on Earth where we have to be the most concerned, right? Because they have both the talent, the capacity, and
Scale,
and the desire to act on it, and they're acting on it.
Right.
So that's one lens of it. The other lens, which I preoccupy the majority of my time, is how do we run faster, right? So my passion is to build things and to create things and to catalyze the enormous genius and talent that we have in America at every level on capital, on infrastructure, on science, and really focus on that. But we have to be keenly aware that time is not, in our favor.
Urgency, yeah.
There's an enormous urgency with which we need to act. And the urgency is determined by the rate and change of technological change in AI and these computing areas, and by our pacing competitor.
Yeah.
So, and that honestly is like the biggest risk of this whole endeavor. We have all the ingredients to be wildly successful.
Right.
But we need to focus, and we need to act with enormous sense of urgency. I am hopeful that the Genesis mission provides us as a catalyst to have clarity of why we need to succeed on this as a modern day version of past programs that inspire the nation like Apollo and others. They're not identical in nature. Those are about a concrete objective, landing a man on the moon or building a nuclear weapon. The nature is different, but the urgency is the same.
Right. I know you're passionate about quantum. And I think quantum is one of those technological, fields that we are neck and neck with China. How do you define quantum advantage? I know you don't like to call it quantum supremacy. You like to say quantum advantage.
Look, I mean, quantum is an enormous passion of mine, and this is the most exciting to be in the field right now, because we are on the cusp of realizing a dream that has been in quantum information science for many decades.
Right.
We are years away from achieving an objective of building the first sort of scientifically relevant quantum computer that achieves error correction. and that's a big deal,
Right.
right? And so advantage will be in the context of saying that we can solve problems either faster or cheaper or more accurately than we can do with classical computation alone. The future is the combination of quantum computing, AI, and high-performance computing. It's not one substituting the other. Depending on the problems we solve, the ratios of how much we use of each will vary. But there's little doubt that the quantum computing will give an advantage, will give a difference of what you could do just with HPC and AI alone.
Right.
So that's how I define it. It has to add, right. Either quality or time to solution or cost.
Right. My last question, Dr. Gil, you've been now a couple of months in public sector. What is the biggest difference that you can tell from spending 20 plus years in the private sector with how you see and how you operate in the public sector?
The number of stakeholders
Interesting.
is different, right? Like if you're a senior executive in a corporation or in a startup around and you make a decision, right? You have a lot of autonomy and control in the execution of that decision.
Very interesting.
And in government, there are a lot of stakeholders that participate in that process by design.
Yeah.
And that just changes the nature. But one of the things I've learned about it is that people always say, oh, this has to operate like this and that. You just have to learn how to operate in the system in which you live. You can engage in efforts of reform or making things better. But I think I've learned that it is a mistake to say, oh, this should be like the business. It isn't.
Right.
So unless you adapt
Yeah.
and accept how it is and form coalitions, share, build consensus, build context, allow everybody to do their job and unite them through leadership. I think leadership can make a huge difference, but it's the execution mode. How do you get to a decision and how you execute is very different than the private sector.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your service. Incredible conversation. I appreciate your time coming to the SCSP and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.